Hey everyone, welcome to The New Populist. I'm Dave Brown, co-author of the book Black and White: How the Left is Destroying the Dream of Martin Luther King and Our Founding Fathers. If you want a different perspective on race relations, a non-Black Lives Matter point of view, go ahead and pick it up. There is a link in the description. It's available on Amazon. And of course, if you are new to this channel, please share, like, and subscribe. In my last couple of videos, I was discussing critical race theory. And, if there was ever a thing that crystallizes why I wrote this book, this is it. And when you go through critical race theory and you see everything they talk about, oh man, it gets pretty deep. And I think sometimes we hear that name and we just think of just one small thing. It's just one idea. No, it's a collection. It's a whole boatload of ideas, all of them fairly radical. And as we go through, we're going to see that they're also fairly destructive. Now, one category or one section of critical race theory I want to discuss today is that of revisionist history. And I think with the New York Times' 1619 project, we're sort of seeing critical race theory and revisionist history sort of combined in that project. Now, they don't tell you that. They won't say that. But when we go through the material, and I will in a second, you'll see how revisionist history from the critical race theory standpoint is really what the New York Times' 1619 project is. So, but first, I want to read an excerpt from the book, Critical Race Theory, an introduction, which was written by Richard Delgado, one of the founders of critical race theory. And again, this book was written in 1995, so this is 25 years old. And if you haven't seen my first video, critical race theory started in the 1970s after the civil rights movement, where a bunch of left-wing academics, lawyers thought that the progress made by the civil rights era hadn't gone far enough, and they started brainstorming and they came up with critical race theory. And Richard Delgado is one of the founders, and so is Derek Bell, who I'll mention in a second. And he wrote this book, Critical Race Theory Introduction, and it lays out what it is. So we don't have to guess or go by the definitions that the media gives us. We can go through the book and find out what it is for ourselves. So let me first read this one excerpt on revisionist history. Derek Bell's analysis of Brown illustrates a second signature CRT theme, revisionist history. Revisionist history re-examines America's historical record, replacing comforting, majoritarian interpretation of events with ones that square more accurately with minorities' experiences. It also offers evidence, sometimes suppressed, in that very record to support those new interpretations. Revisionism is often materialist in thrust, holding that to understand the zigs and zags of Black, Latino, and Asian fortunes, one must look to things like profit, labor supply, international relations, and the interest of elite whites. For the realists, attitudes follow, explain, and rationalize what is taking place in the material sector. So, we see here that he's pointing to material, meaning that is the thing that pushes forward everything. It's not when we make decisions as far as how we evolve as a society collectively. The driving force is material, not our good nature. So when we see things happen and unfold, we often point to us as man becoming better, and he says no, it's actually material in nature. And he talks about Derek Bell, who again is one of the other founding fathers of critical race theory, and he brings up his analysis of Brown. So what he's talking about is the decision, Brown versus the Board of Education, where they ended segregation. And according to Bell, the reason this happened wasn't because of any sort of benevolence by white people. It was because the interests of elite whites happened to, at that one moment, intersect with the interests of black people. So it wasn't done for a benevolent cause. It just so happened that it benefited elite white people. And Bell wrote this article in 1980, and I think it appeared in the Harvard Law Journal, and it was called Brown versus Board of Education and the Interest Convergence Dilemma. So he wrote this in 1980, and Richard Delgado is referring back to this in 1995 in his book, Critical Race Theory. And it's interesting to note that, everything we see from critical race theory boils back to this idea that there is no sort of good-natured human being. Everything has a motive. Everything is, pushed forward by greed and material wealth. And even when good things happen, it's not for the reasons we're told. And then that's where we start to see the revisionist history. And I want to read one more excerpt, and then I want to go through a few slides on that I got from the New York Times' 1619 Project webpage to sort of show you how they overlap with what I'm reading right here from Richard Delgado's book. So let me read this other excerpt here. The difference between materialist and the idealist is no minor matter. It shapes strategy on decisions of how and where to invest one's energies. If the materialists are right, one needs to change the physical circumstances of minorities' lives before racism will abate. One takes seriously matters like unions, immigration quotas, and the loss of industrial jobs to globalization. If one is an idealist, campus speech codes, tort remedies for racist speech, diversity seminars, and increasing the representation of Black, Brown, and Asian actors on television shows will be high on one's list of priorities. A middle ground would see both forces, material and cultural, operating together and synergizing each other so that race reformers working in either area contribute to a holistic project of racial redemption. So looking back at this, what he says here, he talks about the fact that racism can't be cured until blacks are equal on the material level. And if you think about that for a second, what he's saying is that it's not just about having people have the same right to pursue happiness. He's saying they have to force this outcome of equality before we can get rid of racism. And how do you force it? Through government, more specifically through the heavy hand of government, getting involved in people's lives, redistributing wealth, and forcing sort of this colorful society, this rainbow society. And the problem with this is that every time we see this happen, where the government tries to force these equal outcomes, it usually ends in disaster. I know there's a popular saying that anytime you have forced outcomes or forced equality ends with bodies being bulldozed into ditches, and that's happened across the world in the 20th century, from Russia to other countries. So that is the danger, is forcing these outcomes. And in the second part here, he talks about having more representation of people of color on television. So think about that. 25 years ago, he talks about this, and right now, you turn your TV on, we see that. And again, there's nothing wrong with having people of color on television, but obviously, and what he's saying is it's not happening by accident. It's not let's just have more people on color on TV because it's nice. It's part of a strategy to force a sort of equality and to forcefully change how people look at this country. And he says that it's a middle ground to have this materialist approach and this other approach where we have, tort remedies for racist speech and diversity seminars. He thinks that's mild. But But he points to having both of these strategies together to synergize in order to fight racism. So there's a lot here. And again, the thing you need to take away from this is that it's not a subtle sort of action he's talking about. These are pretty, heavy-handed actions that require government and corporations all together. People think it's just the government. No, it's the government and these private companies and these public universities, private universities, all together forcing these ideas at once. So we think of critical race theory as being something that, I just heard about it in my local school being taught. No, this has been in action in different levels of society for decades now. And to use an analogy, and I think it's apt for what's going on right now, it's like a virus that your immune system hasn't detected yet, and it's spread everywhere. And then finally in 2019, 2020, us on the right became aware of it, and we went, holy crap, what the hell is this? Well, it evaded our immune system for all these decades, and then finally we saw it, and the problem is it too late? Because again, it's not a new concept, it's been around for a very long time. And just now, you're standing in front of your school boards going, what the hell is this critical race theory? Why is it being taught? And you're about 30 years, 40 years too late. But that doesn't mean we don't fight, we still do. But I'm just awareing you that this is not a new concept. And I want to go through these slides from the New York Times Magazine, the 1619 Project, because it illustrates just how much critical race theory and the 1619 Project overlap. And from their website, it describes the 1619 Project here. It says, the 1619 Project is an ongoing initiative from the New York Times Magazine that began in August 2019, the 400th anniversary of the beginning of American slavery. It aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of our national narrative. So, again, what is critical race theory about? It and revisionist history. It is changing the lens of how we look at history through the lens of race, and if you understand critical race theory, through the lens of materialism and how material drives societies and the decisions we make. And they say here, a re-education is necessary. So your child at school is being taught the critical race theory agenda. He is currently being re-educated. Here is another slide from the New York Times Magazine 1619 Project website. Our democracy's founding ideals were false when they were written. Black Americans have fought to make them true. Another one. If you want to understand the brutality of American capitalism, you have to start on the plantation. Again, here we are bringing together capitalism, racism, and the material drive for society. So again, we're seeing this intersection of, the 1619 Project and critical race theory and money, slavery, color, and capitalism. Another slide here. Again, these are titles of articles on their website. America holds onto an undemocratic assumption from its founding that some people deserve more power than others. And one of the fundamental tenets of critical race theory is the idea that you can't get rid of race until all races have complete equity in sharing power and sharing material. And so according to the 1619 Project, the entire structure of our country was built to say that white people will rule and Black people won't. Now, at the beginning, that did happen, and we were changing that. And I thought, we were changing that for the better, but apparently somewhere in, 2012, when Black Lives Matter started, and we took all that progress we made to get better, and we started moving backwards into this hellhole that we are in today of just all this chaos and fighting. Another one. Slavery gave America a fear of black people and a taste for violent punishment. Both still define our prison system. So, once again, the aftershocks of slavery never end, according to the critical race theorists and the 1619 Project. It still plays out today. And the question is, again, when does this ever get good enough? And of course, they said we have our definition of what they say. But, if you believe them, you're crazy. It will never be good enough. And it will only be good enough when they have absolute and complete power. Don't be mistaken. And one more here, a vast wealth gap driven by segregation, redlining, evictions, and exclusion separates black and white America. Again, critical race theory talks about material differences. And here we are pointing out again the wealth gap. So you can really see how critical race theory, revisionist history, the 1619 Project, they're the one and the same by a different name. And, they don't always put the stamp of critical race theory on things they do. They don't always aware you. You have to pay attention. And it's funny right now, this last year, I think people are slowly being red-pilled in a way of what's going on. And that's why I started this channel in part, because I want to, give people some more in-depth ideas of what's actually going on versus what we see in the media. Because when you actually look through the material, it's not a conspiracy, or it's not, we don't have to guess what it is. They tell us what it is. All we have to do is listen. And again, it's a radical philosophy of critical race theory. It's in play everywhere. And we are just becoming aware of it on the right, but it's been around for a very, very long time. Well, that's it for now. I will do some more videos on critical race theory in the future. There's a lot there, and you can't really cover it all in just a few minutes. You really got to break it down to properly understand it and to see just how radical it is. So that's what I'm trying to do. Once again, if you're new to this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. I will see you next time.